was a study done in 2016 about the human eye in particular. What scientists had discovered with this study is that in the midst of the darkest scenarios, say in the darkest of caves, where it's pitch black, there is no sun, there is nothing to illuminate the way, but perhaps a single photon of light, one of the smallest things that can be seen, the human eye can detect that. We as people are so finely tuned towards light, and we are programmed to search for light so much that we can detect it at such a small level. It was even said that if you imagine this, it is remarkable. A photon, the smallest physical entity with quantum properties of which light consists, I know that's a lot of big words, is interacting with a biological system, being us, consisting of billions of cells that make up our body, all in this one type of environment. It's like a cave in this warm, wet environment that we can see it, and how astonishing that is. But it's not just with our biology that we are fine-tuned to light, but it's something that in our daily culture, whenever it comes to religious reasons or for secular things, light is such a big concept to us. Whenever you consider things such as law, you consider the light being where there is safety, where there is protection, where there is clear order, versus darkness where there is crime, mischief, misdemeanor, and all kinds of other things. You look at some of the most popular movies, the Star Wars franchise, for example, they had this whole big portrayal of the light side versus the dark side. The dark side being very corrupt, very impure, very selfish, whereas the light is very peaceful. It is seeking to provide order to all. It is seeking to live in a way that achieves enlightenment, and so on and so forth. But specifically in Scripture as well, it is such a big key. And so we're going to look at some examples of how light is used in Scripture, and then we'll also be talking about how to let our light shine, but more importantly, how to keep our light going. But before we move any further, let's see the notebooks. Awesome. The 3 key words: bright, pure, and steadfast. Bright, as is mentioned in Matthew chapter 5 that our brother just read, we are supposed to be shining our lights brightly for the world around us to see. That we'll be talking about the reasons later on. Pure in that it is something that is undefiled, it is set apart, it is holy and sanctified as we are to be as the children of God, and it is steadfast. We are under a constant assault every single day to snuff out that light. We even have it as a popular song for our kids about this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Am I going to let Satan blow it out? Am I going to hide it under a bushel, as they say? And that is so important for us to remain steadfast. So some of the examples that we have Psalm 19, verse 105, which is a very common one, of your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. That being that God is our light, God's words are our light, that is directing us in the way it should go. So it is a guide. We also have verse 130 as well in Psalm 119. The unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. So we have another example of light, but instead of it being not only a guide, but it's something that provides wisdom and understanding. We also have Psalm 27, verse 1. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? I really appreciate our brother Brandon leading that psalm because it is so integral, that light providing safety that we mentioned earlier. A verse I would like for us to read together. If you will, look with me in John chapter 1. John chapter 1, picking up in verse 4. In John chapter 1, picking up in verse 4, I'll be reading from the New King James Version. It says, "In him being Christ, was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but he was sent to bear witness of that light." So whenever it talks about Christ himself, that he was the guide, he was the one who provided wisdom and understanding that he is God, like those verses in Psalms we mentioned, but that he himself is the light for others, that even John, who was sent by God to simply bear witness to the light, to provide testimony of Christ being that light. We also have 1 John chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. So that light being something that is shared between us with God, but it also mentions about walking in darkness. So there is a time when we may be displaying our light, but it can be snuffed away, and we are indeed walking in darkness, lost, unsure of where to go. Identifying that there is a very importance to continue looking to the light, to make sure that we are indeed standing in the light and having fellowship with God, who is light. We also have 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. "You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellence of him who has called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light." Again, that light being set apart and sanctified, it has a very specific purpose. It's not supposed to be similar to this world. It's supposed to be different, so that it is a key indication. And then we have, again, those verses of Matthew 5, 14 through 16 that we mentioned earlier. So what all does it mean to be a light? Whenever we talk about being a light, if we look at Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it gives a clear indication of that we are indeed meant to be different as being lights in the world. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, back up to verse 1. "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So in order for us to be different, in order for us to be that light, we have to go through some form of transformation. We all encounter that time in our life where we stumble, where we sin. For those of us who are Christians, we also have that moment where we realize just who we've been, that we have been living in darkness, that we don't know what we're doing, that I don't know where I'm going with my life. Something has to change. I need something and someone to guide me in the way I should go so that I can be that light. It does mean being pure as well. If we look in Proverbs is one of my favorite books within the Bible because there's so much practical daily wisdom in it. In Proverbs chapter 1, looking at verses 10 through 15, it says, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us,' let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path. There are people who are going to be around us, as we know, and we've probably all encountered it. We could even say today, yesterday, a week before. So often, there are people around us who are going to pull us away or who are going to try to entice us. But that light has to remain. We have to be that light and remain pure and undefiled. But if we are choosing to give in, if we are choosing to follow after these people that it's talking about in these verses, and now it may not be something as in, let us go out and shed blood. It could be things as, hey, it's 5 o'clock, it's happy hour, let's go grab a drink. Could be things as innocent as maybe, well, I don't need to worship because I need to take my kids to PTA meeting or after school programs. Things that to us seem innocent, seem honest, that we're wanting to do the best for our kids, but is distracting us from the real important things. We also have to be of service to others if we are going to be that light. If we look in Galatians chapter 5, verse 13, Paul writes numerous times in this letter about being a light to others through being of service to one another. In Galatians chapter 5, looking down in verse 13, it says, "For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." We have to be taking care of one another if we are going to be that light. It even mentions in Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. So first, take care of yourself to make sure that you are not being tempted and that you are not being led astray. But if your brother is stumbling, you are to be that light to them, because that light does not need to die out. So you restore them, you take care of your brother. And so yes, we may do things such as meals for each other, which is beneficial, cards, phone calls, emails. But it's also important to take the time to check on each other spiritually, to ensure that that person that you're sitting next to isn't dealing with some type of secret sin that could be persuading them to lose their light and to lose that fellowship with God and be in darkness. We also have to be willing to work. And it does take work to let your light shine. In Philippians chapter 2, Philippians chapter 2, look with me in verse 14. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. So yes, we are doing things. We are working. We are looking to be of service of one another. We are looking to be of service to the world and showing our light and showing the light of God to them. But we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way without complaining and disputing. The past few months I've been working at a job that I would much prefer to be doing something else, but it's something for me to do, it's something for me to work. And so there's a lot of times where I feel that I want to complain, that I want to dispute, that I want to argue about why do I have to put up with this? Why do I have to keep doing it? Why is it that I am having to take care of other people's jobs? But as a light in the world, I don't need to be that way. I should be willing to help, be willing to do the work, so that whenever people see me, maybe that is something where someone can say, you know what, Oren, the way you work is so different than anything I've seen. What is it about you that keeps you going? What is it that drives you to move forward in the way that you do? We have to be willing to glorify God, because that's what it all comes down to with being a light. And that's the whole purpose with being different and being pure, being service to others, and being willing to work, is so that we do glorify our God in heaven. If you look with me, Acts chapter 10. Look with me in Acts chapter 10. If we begin in Acts chapter 10, verse 1, there was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment, a devout man and one who feared God with all his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. About the ninth hour of the day, he saw clearly in a vision an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. And when he observed him, he was afraid, and he said, What is it, Lord? So he said to him, Your prayers and your alms have come up for a memorial before God. Now send men to Joppa and send for Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodging with Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the sea. He will tell you what you must do. And when the angel spoke to him, he had departed. Cornelius called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier from among those who waited on him continually. So when he had explained all these things to them, he sent them to Joppa. So Cornelius was a man who served God. He looked to glorify and honor God. But there was also a very specific way that he was supposed to, that he may have not been aware of yet. Because as it shows here, that an angel called for him to send for Peter. And so we may be doing things that are good, and we may be doing things that are right, and it may have been a time where before becoming Christians, we were seeking to do what's right. We were seeking to be that light in the world, but there may be just a few things that we don't know. There may be a few things that we don't understand. We can also look in Acts about Apollos, that he was looking to preach others and to be a light in the world, but he only knew the Gospel of John. Now, that was great what he was doing, and he was doing all these things that we talked about. He was being that example of a light in the world, but he still had to learn. He had to be pulled aside, and he had to be taught what it meant to glorify God. He had to be taught the proper way of being a light. And so whenever we consider our relationship with God, we do have to consider that we are serving, but that we are serving in truth. So how do we keep our light shining? Because like we've mentioned before and time again, it is something that can be blown away. It is something that can be hidden. It is something that can be tainted. Just like whenever you hold a flashlight in a dark room and you slowly cover your hand, that light goes away. It still may be there a little bit, but no one can see it. No one can be guided by that light that is hidden in the palm of your hand. So how do I keep that light shining? How do I keep from maybe standing in my own way and covering up that light? We do have to be steadfast. We will be tempted. We will have to contend earnestly for the faith, as it talks about in Jude verse 3. I remember my time in the military, and I've used this example before, that I turned 21 while I was on base serving, and all of my friends came up to me and said, "Hey, happy birthday, you're 21. You ready to go to the bar after work and get drunk?" And I had to say, no. I'm sorry, guys. I enjoy my time with you. I enjoy our friendship, but no. I won't be a part of this. And even one person pulling me to the side and saying, "You're in the military. Like, it's part of the culture that you drink." But I had to be steadfast that no, I will not partake of this because I serve someone higher than the governing authorities, or that is more important than my status among my friends, and that I will be different. But we also have to keep our mind on Christ. In John chapter 12, open the scriptures with me to John chapter 12. In John chapter 12, look down to verse 34. The people answered him, "We have heard from the law that the Christ remains forever. And how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man?" Then Jesus said to them, "A little while longer the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light." These things Jesus spoke and departed and was hidden from them. So Jesus even mentioning there about him being the light with them. And so while I am still here, focus on the things that I teach. Walk in the way I walk. Learn the things that I say, so that you may become a son as well. And it's just the same for us, that we have to ensure that we are walking. We have to ensure that we are reading the manner in which Jesus lived his life, so that we can ensure that we are as well becoming sons and daughters of the light. Back up a few chapters to chapter 8. In chapter 8 of John, looking in verse 12. Backing up to verse 12. "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." We have to focus and stay strong. If we look in Luke chapter 9, in verses 23 and 24. Then he said to them all, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world, is it himself destroyed or lost? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words, of him the Son of Man will be ashamed when he comes in his own glory, and in his Father's and of the holy angels. But I tell you truly, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the kingdom of God." So Christ even indicating there that there is going to be a time when this all ends. There is going to be a moment where we are not able to have that opportunity to let our light shine. There is a time where God is going to come again. So focus on him while we have the time. Ephesians talks about while we have the time, to be redeeming the time, to make sure that we are following Christ and that we are setting ourselves apart and being steadfast in the faith. We also need to be staying in prayer, because it is through our communication with God and it is through our time with God that we are able to keep our light shining. Otherwise, it can fade away, and it fades away without us even realizing it. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 17, it talks about praying without ceasing, to continue praying always. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 2 as well. Colossians chapter 4, looking in verse 2. "Continue earnestly in prayer, being vigilant in it with thanksgiving." Being vigilant being that you are dedicated, that you are diligent to make sure that is being done. In other words, prayer is something that we should be making time for. That yes, my day is exhausting, my day is long, I may be working 10, 12, 14 hours. I need to make time for prayer. I need to make time to be speaking with God. so that I can continue to let my light burn, to be fueling that fire so that it doesn't go away, and so that I don't eventually realize that I may be lost again, and that I don't know where the light is anymore. I don't know where my light is anymore. So I need to be making time for that. I need to be making sure to do the good work as well. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 15. Be diligent to present yourself approved of God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Now look with me as well to Matthew chapter 22. Matthew chapter 22. So in Matthew chapter 22, verses 29, we have an indication where Jesus is speaking to the Sadducees about the resurrection. And that even though they were seeming to know the scriptures because of the questions that they were asking, he says, you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. So how can I be understanding God's wisdom, God's strength, if I'm not in the scriptures? And if I'm not doing the work to show myself approved? Meaning that whenever I am showing myself approved, I have to be making sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons. That I'm not doing this just so that I can look good in the eyes of men. That I'm not standing here in front of you speaking the scriptures just so that someone can lean over and say, you know, that Oren, he's a really good guy. He's a really good speaker. He may be able to interpret things well or explain things in a way that is easy for me to understand. That the real reasons I am doing this is so that I am doing the good work to glorify my God, and that I am able to continue to grow. If I'm not doing the good work, then I am not able to grow. If I am not searching the scriptures daily, I am not able to grow. If I'm not focusing on Christ, my light cannot grow, and it will indeed fizzle out. One more passage, and the lesson will be yours. 2 Peter chapter 1. Second Peter chapter 1, look down in verse 5. But also for this very reason, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, to virtue knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. For if these things are yours and abound, you will be neither barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For he who lacks these things is short-sighted, even to blindness, and has forgotten that he was cleansed from his old sins. So if I'm not prospering, if I'm not looking to add these things to myself, it is as if I can't see the light at all, as if I was born without vision. We have to be sure to be growing. I have to be sure that I am growing so that I can let my light shine. So the question I want to leave with you this evening is, are you shining your light? There may be some here this evening who have not learned what it means to be a Christian, that you may be just now discovering that light, that you may be going through a dark tunnel at this time, but then there's that light at the end, and that light is God. But there may be some who have committed yourself to Christ but have since lost your way. That light's been hidden, whether people tempting you and leading you astray, or you standing in your own way so that you can't see the light anymore. I ask that you please consider if that light is still there for you. If there's any need, won't you please come forward as we stand and we sing.